Good? Good to go? All right. SHALAM, Christ is officer of 1,000 Yahweh, and it's the Monday Night History class. Today we talking about one of our Gadite brothers, one of their tribes. It's the history of the Comanche. All right, the Comanche, they were like, don't get me wrong, all Gadites were warriors, but this one was like known for being the warrior tribe. Some of like, you might have had other Gadite tribes, they might have been a little bit more, a little bit more chill, you know what I mean? Because a lot of Gadites, they're a little bit more relaxed, a little more reserved, they just want to be peaceful. The Comanche wasn't like that. The Comanche, it might have been some Judah mixed in there, you know? Might have been some Judah mixed in there, but the Comanche, they was about that smoke. They wanted to fight, all right? Let's see here. All right. So we're gonna get into the history though. If you go back through Comanche history, you see that they were the ones who stopped the Spanish from coming north. He explains. Why did the French stop coming west from Louisiana? The Comanches. Here was why the West Coast and the East Coast settled before the middle of the country. Here it was why there was basically a 40-year war before you could develop the state of Texas before any plain states could be developed. So those states on the plain, they ruled over them states in the Great Plains, like what, Kansas, some Missouri, Louisiana, where it was like all around that kind of, going west kind of way over there, they ruled all of that. So, and they had, the French and the Spanish had such a hard time trying to fight them because this was the warrior tribe, right? Okay, there's some interviews on it. I grew up in the Northeast and moved to Texas about 16 years ago, and I started hearing stories about Comanches, and I really didn't know what a Comanche was. I think I had heard about a Comanche in a John Wayne movie or something, but I really didn't know who they were. When I started to read a little bit about them, I realized that they were just this enormous force of nature sitting in the middle of the North American continent who determined how the West opened. So, it was a lot of, they were trying to go west. All of the cowboys and Indians, the ones you see on the Texas and all of that, a lot of times they were fighting each other. They were fighting the Comanches because they, like I said, they was a major warrior tribe. They wanted to smoke. On what the raid of on a Parker Fort was like. This is what Indians did to Indians, and this just happened to be Indians meeting whites. But the automatic thing in battle is that all the adult males would be killed. That was automatic. That was one of the reasons that Indians fought to the death. The white men were astonished by it, but they were assumed that they would be killed. Small children were killed. Very small children were killed. A lot of the children in, say, the 3 to 10 range were often taken as captives. The women were often raped and often killed. And all of the people in the settlements back in those years knew what a Comanche raid was. Now, as far as like I said, this as far as the raping, I don't believe this part, of course, They always got to put that in to try to say, now we need to kill the Comanches, you know what I mean? So some of history, you got to kind of like, they never been known to have been doing these things. You understand what I'm saying? But some of these things, they put it on there because now they can say, well, they killed the men and they raped the women. So, but they don't talk about why they even killed the men. They killed the men because they were killing them, right? They were just defending themselves. So this was a war. This wasn't a, you living in a peaceful settlement and the Comanche just came in and raided the town and killed everybody. This was not it. This was a war. The Comanches were there before the settlers were. So if they hated it so bad, just like what they tell black people. If you hate America so bad, why don't you leave? No, why don't you leave? Since you worried about Indians so much, Native Americans, why don't you leave? You should have left. They didn't want you here. That's why they was killing y'all, right? And it's an interesting kind of moral question as a historian about Plains Indians or American Indians in general. You have to come to terms with this, with torture, which they practice all across the West, and these kind of grisly practices that scare white people to death. On rewriting history to leave out Native American atrocities. There was even an attempt at one point to deny that Indians were warlike. Comanches were incredibly warlike. They swept everyone off of the southern plains. They nearly exterminated the Apaches. That's another Indian tribe. And if you look at the Comanches, and you look back at the history of the Gauls and Vikings or Mongols or Celts, old Celts are actually a very good parallel in a lot of ways. I think we're looking back at the early versions of themselves. We, being white American, did all of those things exactly. Not only that, but torture was institutionalized during things like the Counter-Reformation and the Spanish Inquisition and the Russian Revolution. The Russian Revolution, one of us when they were taken out, because we had black people that were like monks and stuff like that. They would be out in Russia. So they went and tried to, clean up and make everything now white. Right? On how male Comanches became warriors. The Comanches were kind of like the Spartans because of their incredible military mastery, which derived from the horse. They were the prototype horse tribe, the tribe that could do more with the horse than any other tribe could. Because of that, it was a military community, and their old way of life was supplanted by the new way of life, which mainly had to do with war. So they pretty much hunted buffalo and started war. That's all they did. They had fights with each other and they hunted buffalo. That was their thing. And they were amazingly stripped down in that they didn't have social organization or religious organizations. They didn't weave baskets. They had a very stripped down culture. So within the culture, the boys learned to hunt and ride at a very early age, and they would become a warrior in their mid-teens. Okay, somebody just joined. Hey, Shalom, Christ. All right, we're talking about the Comanche, the Native American tribe. All right, one of our Gaddite brothers. How the slaughter of 31 million buffalo between 1868 and 1881 contributed to the downfall of the Comanches. Like we talk about when they killed a whole, a ton of buffalo because they were trying to exterminate the Apaches. They were trying to weaken the Apaches, so that's what they did. They hunted the buffalo because they knew that was their source of food, tools and everything. Like they had a very simple life. So all they did was hunt and fight in war. That was their thing, right? Their lives were built on two things really. Like I said, war and buffalo. All of the Plains Indians, once they got the horse from the Spanish, buffalo hunting became easier for them. It was their way of life. The buffalo hunting began as a simple market exercise. Hunters figured out that they can get $3.50 a hide. Then they figured out they could ship these hides east on the new railroads. And they also figured out that buffaloes were not smart enough to realize that if a buffalo next to the buffalo dropped, that there was something wrong. The buffalo had to see the source of the danger. So you have to kill. So you would have these people who would kill 3,500 buffalo in 28 days. It occurred to the generals in the West, specifically Philip Sheridan and William Sherman, that by allowing the buffaloes to be destroyed, they were creating the most efficient way to destroy Indians. And Sheridan had a famous quote. He said, "You kill the buffalo, you destroy the Indians' commissary." So that's their source of food. So it became political at the end. Yes, let's kill the buffalo, and then it's the end of the Plains Indians, because there is no Plains Indian without a buffalo. Because you know, in the Plains, there isn't like much to do. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, about you, man. I brought that. I was just checking in.
Hey, Shalom, what's going on, Warren?
I don't know much out of one slave and Slock, if I may. I checked the YouTube and the Facebook. The volume sound pretty low. I don't know if you could bring the mic a little closer or or whatnot, but it's kind of hard to hear you.
Okay. In my SHALAM.
Oh, God, sir.
Go to the OBS part,
Uh-huh.
and there's like a little volume slider at the bottom of one of the things. Like when you hear me talk, you'll see the volume going like that.
Mm-hmm.
See if we can slide that to the right. That should turn it up a little bit.
All right, come, sir.
All right, go out. So we talking about the Comanche warriors. You know anything about the Comanche up?
Slock, not much about the Comanche, but I know they way of life and stuff. The things they did wasn't too far from the creeks.
Mm-hmm.
They more live further inward on the land and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't well, the difference with the creeks, like what my family were, I did pulpwood and all their life, you know what I'm saying? They did a lot of things like running logs and stuff up the rivers and stuff, and they just been all on they were more into the trading and stuff like that, But
you said the Cree word or the Comanche?
Like I can hear you.
You said which one was more into the trading?
The Creeks and the Cherokees, they were more the ones that did most of the trading and stuff like that, like the Comanches and stuff. I mean, they lived on the land too, And I heard bits and pieces what you were saying about the buffalo and stuff like that, and what all you saying about that is totally true. Like we didn't natives, the Creeks and the Cherokees and all them, that none of them really raised. But they raised some farm animals and stuff like that. What my people used to tell us and stuff, they did mostly have, live off the source of the buffaloes and stuff like that. You didn't our ancestors, live off cows and stuff, raise cows. They didn't raise cows and stuff like that. You didn't hear too much of them talk about doing that stuff back in the back in the 1700s and stuff like that. You didn't hear too much talk of that. It was more there, living off goats and deers and buffalo. That was like their primary source. But like we know, they used the buffalo not just for their meat, but mainly their coats and stuff like that. It was just most popular source animal to use, for their resources and stuff like that. Weapons and tools and sort. So like.
Are you good? Listen to you. All right.
Block out one. They should be able to hear you better now. I got the volume all the way up.
Okay.
Block you out of one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the Comanches, from my understanding, they was always at war with the Apaches, and the Comanches were known for their warriors and their horses, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And they was like the strongest badass nation,
That's right.
residing in parts of like Texas, Oklahoma,
Mm-hmm.
and that southern region like that, sir.
Exactly right. I'm trying to find the scripture real quick.
So lock you out of one.
Go ahead.
It kind of piggyback on what Mom Saw was just bringing out, the story that we used to hear like younger, from like even from our, ancestors, well, our older people, our elders, and what we learned in school and stuff. You used to hear stories. You hear a story more from the oppressor about us not getting along, the Cherokees and the Creeks and the Apaches, and about fighting over territory. Kind of what you hear about today, how we kind of fighting over a street corner or a block or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You heard what the press are talking about it, but we never really heard about our families that really saying that we fought amongst one another like that. Those stories that really just came from our oppressors. And when we sit back and look at it, at how much land and territory and stuff we were giving them, I mean, you had certain chiefs in certain villages that, that kind of just, you know, they made those deals and agreements for as giving up land and stuff like that. It's not kind of a high setup today where you got so many landowners and stuff like that. I don't. It's kind of hard to explain as far as what population had a lot to do with it, but especially like during like the time, let's say like the Trail of Tears and stuff like that, you would have like 5 people that stand up in the village and just come together and agree about what portions of land and stuff that they would actually give, not sell or not trade, but just give to the oppressor. You didn't have groups of families and stuff just standing up. Well, look, I'm gonna give up this portion of land, or I'm gonna give up this. You had like 4 or 5 people that would stand up and just making a coming to agreement for just make a deal for everybody. If you get what I'm saying, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I've researched and I still haven't been found nothing from our people saying that we were fighting amongst each other over territory because it was just so much land.
Mm-hmm.
It was so much land. It was so much land. I mean, especially like over here in Georgia, damn near every part of Georgia was fertile. You could grow anything. You could hunt anywhere because the forestry was so thick and deep. You had rivers. You had several major rivers and stuff running through it. Several lakes. You know, fishing. I mean, it just was plentiful in resources. So it was just kind of far fetched that they were saying that we were fighting over territory the way we were. We just didn't hear it coming from our people. We just mostly heard it coming from our oppressors.
Mm-hmm.
Salaki.
You're right. A lot of times, yeah, you have like little squabbles, but like they would seem like they had to come and civilize us. That's the point of their stories. They wanted to act as though it was on them to civilize us, which that's not the truth. They didn't have to civilize us. We were already civilized. They're the only ones that's not civilized. Pray you understand that.
Salaki.
Go ahead.
Yeah, young man there, so check it out.
Yeah, they are the ones that had to be civilized. They didn't even know how to grow on the land, right? They didn't know how to survive on the land. The Native Americans showed them how to do that, right? They showed them how to make their way of life over here, how to have settlements. And what did they do in return to thank their Native Americans? They killed them. They said that talking about they was trying to say that Native Americans raped their women. Like I said, I find that very hard to believe. Do I get it being one or a couple handful of renegades that might have done it? It's possible. But what I'm saying is this was not something that was practiced among our culture. You know what I'm saying? That's never been our culture to do that. Now, it's their culture to do that. So, but they had to say that because, just like, anybody know about Emmett Till, right? What happened with Emmett Till? A white woman said he winked at her or something, right? So they automatically assumed that he's raping her. Like that's rape to them. So now they went and killed this boy, abused him before they even killed him. Did all type of torture to him before they killed him, and then threw him in the river. Go ahead.
So a lot of guys what make the thing so heavy is just underage. How often you hear an underage minor raping an adult woman?
Don't happen.
It's just our oppressor. He in his cave dog is the devil the Bible speaks of.
Right.
It's just I never in history heard of underage minor raping an adult. It's normally like a school teacher, something taking advantage of a little young child or a preacher or somebody like that. But you never hear about a young underage child raping a full grown adult.
Exactly. So that's all it was. And they went and like to them that's rape. So he could have the Native Americans when they went and killed everybody, killed when they did I'm sure it wasn't raised to that point. They were just scared of the Native Americans. So just like what Caucasoid people would do, they fabricate things, right? So now when they fabricate stuff, they now make it a law. If you see a Comanche, you gotta kill them on sight. So now they use those things, like that might have been one raid that something bad happened. But they'll say, oh, they come in, they come in and raid and kill and kidnap, and they start putting all these things on them. So now it justifies their behavior. That's really what it boils down to. It justifies for them to be the devil. If they would leave, right? If they went back to Spain or France, they wouldn't have to worry about the Comanches, right? But that's what they got to do because they mindset, they don't even care about their women. They wanted money. They seen the natural resources where it's not the United States. They seen the natural resources. They seen capitalism. They seen dollar signs, right? And that's what made them stay because they, like you said, they came to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what they did. They wanted to pursue their happiness, and their happiness is making everybody a slave under them. That's their happiness. And liberty, they wanted to be free, but they wanted you to be a slave. But they can be free, right? And they want to, like I said, they want to pursue that happiness. That happiness is being wealthy. If you know what is our oppressor, what's his God? Greenbacks, right? That's his God, his money. That's who he serves loyally. So that's the one thing you know about oppressor. Whenever anything behind any movement that they do is money. Don't think that they're doing something favor to you. What they used to give gifts to the Native Americans, but what they say, a gift destroyed the heart. Because they tried to destroy their heart so they could take their land. That was the point of them doing all of that. All right? Let's see here. Yeah, so they said they. Go ahead.
This is Sister Rikita checking in.
Hey, Shalom, crazy sis. How you doing?
I'm Sawab, sir. I wanted to ask a question.
Go ahead.
Where do the saying "Don't be an Indian giver" come from? Because they try to make it seem as if the Indians gave things to I'm guessing the oppressors and wanted to take it back or something like that. Is that where that comes from?
It's sort of, but I'll break it down for you. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Let's say Okay. Like, you know, you got your house, right? You got a big house, okay? Now, let's say I'm coming into town. What would you do, right? Let's say a brother in the school.
I'm sorry, like you said.
Oh, you good. Let's say, you know, we in the school and, you know, I'm coming, like, you live, like, let's say you live on, you live in South Georgia or something, and I'm coming into town, I needed somewhere to stay. What would you do?
I would invite you to my home.
Mm-hmm. Yep, but we invite you to your home. And then if somebody is civilized, what would they do? They'll offer something back and say, hey, you know, on my travels, I collected this. You know, if it's a traveler, right? They collected this, right? That's what the Caucasians were doing. They were giving something, and so the Native Americans took it as though they were just reciprocating, you know, giving something back. But let's say I'm in your house, right? I start walking around with my shoes on, with muddy boots on. I start rearranging all your furniture. You know what I'm saying? I start trying to oppress you in your house. What would you do then?
I would take that invite back.
Exactly. You would kick my, it's like kick my behind out, right? That's
Right.
that's what they were doing. They were trying to give trinkets for the land, but then they were oppressing them. So the Native Americans just thought it was just like, you know, like we give the generals, we give them a tribute, right? That's what they thought. They thought they were just giving gifts, but they weren't. They were trying to give, you know, a little trinket that, you know, the Native Americans may have not seen for their land. But no, they thought it was something like, you know, they were trying to share the land with everybody. They were trying to just share it. And they said, yo, we could still come on this land. The thought of somebody owning land was, you know, preposterous to them. They didn't understand that. But that's what they wanted. They wanted to own the land, and they would give them, you know, little trinkets like a mirror, you know, stuff like that. Like, come on now, our people are not stupid. They would not trade up their land that they get the resources for a damn mirror. Right? That doesn't even make sense. The Native Americans weren't stupid people. They thought it was a gift to them for them taking care of them. So then that's where the term Indian givers came, because they wanted to take back the land because they were basically, you know, lying and disrespecting them. So it's like we talked about all the treaties that they've done, all the treaties they made with the Native Americans. They broke every single one of them, right? They made treaties saying we won't come in, like the reservations. How many times they didn't move their reservation? About 100 damn times. We moved you to Florida. We want Florida now. So they moved them to Trail of Tears. Then they was all over Oklahoma and Kansas, all of that area. But oh no, we found some oil over there, so we got to move y'all again. That's why they do. They keep moving them. All right. I was watching a Native American show or whatever. It was like the show they were showing how they live. Man, don't you ever think Native Americans is living great in these damn casinos, man. These are Edomites. The Native Americans I saw lit like you think that some of our brothers south of the border live rough, right? They in America living worse than them. They live in trailers where the water is leaking down inside of their house, inside the room, and seeping on the floor. They gotta have bags to cover up their clothes, man.
Salaki.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's Desmond. When I like when I first started, I turned like when they had me going to pick up somebody. I ain't know nothing about this stuff really. And I had and it was like dark out there. They ain't have no street lights or nothing. It felt like I was pulling up in a dirt road or something, man, to get to the location.
Yo, they is living terrible, man. Don't let them casinos fool you. That's not Native Americans. It's not Gadites. That is Edomites in there with a Gadite great grandmother. Go ahead.
So like I don't want that's them $5 Indians.
Exactly.
Because you could go what they were doing in Oklahoma or some of the casinos, like you could buy a Dow's number to say you were Indian and get the benefits for it.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have to be one. You know what I'm saying? So that was more them taking more land from them and more benefits from the real Native, you know what I'm saying, Native Indian.
That's what it was. That was the PPP loan scam before the PPP loan scam.
Right.
But you see, they don't go to jail for it. See what I'm saying? They locking black people up for a PPP scam, ain't they? They getting locked up.
Okay.
Every day, people getting locked up because of the PPP loans. Go ahead.
Yeah, another thing I noticed when I was out there too, that the most I let me see was like the Indians and the natives and the Mexicans. They was like, man, like they was like in relationships and they was pretty cool. They was pretty tight. They was like the same thing out there for real. Like they was connected out there, man, for real. And and I was so thankful because I'm from down south, but just being out there, man, like being away from all the brothers and stuff down south, I was just seeing these Mexican brothers and sisters and these Indians, and I'm like, man, they party like us, they move like they move like us, they like they look like the niggas, except they was out their way, man, and I was just thankful then. And at the same time, God let me see these white boys, these Marines and shit, they drunk and gay as hell. I'm picking them up. You know, I'm driving the cab, so I got to pick them up and take them to where they going. But I used to hear them having them little gay ass conversations and shit, man, and they be drunk and shit. And I be like, this who they got watching over. They supposed to be the baddest motherfuckers in the military. And they some gay fucking gays and shit. And I was just thankful that God let me see all this stuff while he was showing me about the truth. So that's
Yeah, that's what they are. They are disgusting. They are disgusting. But they want to show like the Native Americans that they were disgusting. Who you think was more sexually immoral?
The Edomite.
Exactly, the Edomites. Go ahead.
It's a lot got them on. So what they like to do is call the native, the Native Indians. They like to call them savages.
Oh yeah.
But when they came over here, they showed them how to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like those were the real savages that hit that, they hit that land. Them was the savages, not the people, not the native, not the Native Indians. A lot of people.
I mean, now it's written in places that how clean they were, how often they took baths and washed their behind, and there was also a record on how funky they were. the Spaniards and all of them. It was noted they was funky.
Salakia, sir. They brought out diseases over here.
Exactly. Because they funky. They don't know how to bathe, man.
Come.
You say they starting to bathe now. The Native Americans starting to, hey, you might want to bathe more than once a week. It might be good for you. It might be a good idea to do it once a week.
Thank you, sir.
Go ahead.
They are the reasons, like even now to this day, that for the disease, the alcoholism and the drug use on the reservations, and they make them feel like, oh, you get the benefit, you get this check every month, but they're spending their money on the drugs and the alcohol. And and like the young man was saying, with the diseases coming in, that's coming in from the oppressor and their nasty ways, and they're pushing this onto the reservations even today.
Yeah, they do. They turned alcohol, because you know why? They are in a depression. You basically took this great warrior tribe and basically, I know they lived in teepees, but the teepees, I'm sure it was cleaner than them damn trailers. They didn't leak. And you just put them into the work. They They like I said, those are just native projects, reservation projects.
Okay.
They no different. I went through a reservation. I thought I was up in what's the hood from where I'm from? It looked like I was in I was going through. If you from Cleveland, I was going through King Kennedy projects. Like I was going through the hood, down the way. That's what you call it, down the way.
That sound like the hood.
That's what I'm saying. King Kennedy. I can't remember all these names no more, but that was one. That's where I think my mom was from, King Kennedy projects. So it's like they literally is set up the same apartments, like one going out a little bit more than the other, and going like this. It's the same exact apartments, man. These are projects that they living in. And the only thing different, instead of Judites, you see Gadites and Issacharites coming out of them. The same exact struggle. Right? There is no different. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's another thing too. I noticed when I was out there is you all the way right, man. Like they wasn't living nice out there, but I noticed, man. Like I was seeing a lot of real dark skinned Mexicans and the Native Americans. They look like us, man. You know, you got a cousin of somebody in your family with a good hair. They look just like some niggas with good hair. And I was like, man, it was messing me up because like. You know, my life was so terrible at the time. I had prayed. I started praying and stuff, like, you know, and it's like God just started showing me all this stuff, man. Before I come across the truth, man. Like He started showing me all this stuff. And it was just crazy, man. And it was just solid. Everything was just solid, just making sense. So, man, but that's all that said about me.
Yeah, that's right. So, man, they try to make it seem like they look different than us. They did not. The one thing I will say, the more lighter skinned, they typically were more on the western coast. The western coast. On the eastern coast, the natives were darker skinned. Typically, you know what I'm saying? Right. Not, of course, not all, you know what I mean? But typically, they were a darker shade and looked more like Judites and on the east side of the country. But on the west side, they were a little lighter skinned. All right. So, all right, let's get into it. All right, new kind of war. Cavalrymen remember such moments, the dust swirling behind the pack mules, regimental bugles shattering the air, horses snorting and riders creaking through the ranks. Through their old company song rising in the wind. Come home, John, don't stay long. Come home soon to your old chickabiddy. The date was October 3rd, 1871. 600 soldiers and 20 Tonkawa scouts had bivouacked on a lovely bend of the clear fort of the Brazos in a rolling scar prairie of grama grass, scrub oak, sage, chaparral, about 150 miles west of Fort Worth, Texas. Now they were breaking camp, moving out in a long, snaking line through the high cut banks and quicksand streams. Though they did not know it at the time, the idea would have seemed preposterous. The sounding of boots and saddle that morning marked the beginning of the end of the Indian Wars in America, a fully 250 years of bloody combat that had begun almost with the first landing of the first ship on the first fatal shore in Virginia. The final destruction of the last of the hostile tribes would not take place for a few more years. That time would be yet required to round them all up or starve them out or exterminate their sources of food or run them into the ground to shallow canyons or kill them outright. For the moment, the question was one of hard, unalloyed will. There had been brief spasms of official vengeance and retribution before. J.M. Chivington's and George Armstrong Custer his savage massacres of the Cheyennes in 1864 and 1868 were examples. But in those days, there was no real attempt to destroy the tribes on a larger scale. No stomach for it. That had changed. And on October 3rd, the change assumed the form of an order barked out through the lines of command to the men of the 4th Cavalry and 11th Infantry to go forth and kill Comanches. It was the end of anything like tolerance, the beginning of the final solution. So they wanted to go and kill them because now they have basically riled up. Just like if you see anytime they want to rile up, they people, they say they're coming in and raping our women and doing this and doing that. They're savages. They don't deserve to be human. I'm like, well, all they had to do was hop their happy behinds back on them ships and go back to Europe. Why didn't they just do that? Because they don't want to. They want their land. They wanted their resources, man. They wanted all of that. And they wanted to make them slaves. The white men were grunts, bluecoats, cavalry, and dragons. Mostly veterans of the war between the states who now found themselves at the edge of the known universe, ascending to the turreted rock towers that gated the fabled Llano Estacado. Coronado's term for it, meaning palisaded plains of West Texas, a country populated exclusively by the most hostile Indians on the continent, where few U.S. soldiers had ever gone before. The Llano was a place of extreme desolation, a vast, trackless, and featureless ocean of grass where white men became lost and disoriented and died of thirst. A place where the imperial Spanish had once marched confidently forth to hunt Comanches, only to find that they themselves were the hunted, the ones to be slaughtered. In 1864, Kit Carson had led a large force of federal troops from Santa Fe and attacked the Comanche band at a trading post called Adobe Walls, north of modern-day Amarillo. He had survived it, but he had come home with a whisker of watching his 3 companies. They had come within a whisker of watching his 3 companies of cavalry and infantry destroyed. See, because they were in the desert, so they didn't, in the desert, everything looks exactly the same, right?
Okay.
But the Comanches, they knew this land. They've known it for years. For thousands of years, they've known this land. So to them, it was just, that was their backyard. All right? The troops were now going back because enough was enough. Because President Grant's vaunted peace policy toward the remaining Indians, run by his gentle Quaker appointees, had failed utterly to bring peace. And finally, because the exasperated general and chief of the army, William Tecumseh Sherman, had ordered it so. Sherman's chosen agent of destruction was a Civil War hero named Ronald Slidell Mackenzie, a difficult, moody, and implacable young man who had graduated first in his class from West Point in 1862 and had finished the Civil War, remarkably as a brevet brigadier general. Because his hands were so gruesomely disfigured from war wounds, the Indians called him No Finger Chief or Bad Hand. And you gotta have them jokes.
Right.
They call him No Finger Chief or Bad Hand. So I guess he didn't have no fingers. A complex destiny awaited him. Within 4 years, he would prove himself to be the most brutally effective Indian fighter in American history. In roughly that same time period, but that's just like Israel. They gonna name somebody what you is. You black, you dark, they'll call you black.
Right. Right.
That's Israel, man. That's no hands right there.
Right.
Or no fingers.
Yeah.
While General Armstrong or General George Armstrong Custer achieved the world fame in failure and catastrophe, Mackenzie would become obscure in victory. But it was Mackenzie, not Custer, who would teach the rest of the army how to fight Indians. As he moved his men across the broken stream cross country, past immense herds of buffalo and prairie dog towns that were stretched out to the horizon, Colonel Mackenzie did not have a clear idea of what he was doing, where precisely he was going, or how to fight Plains Indians in their homelands. Neither did he have the faintest idea that he would be the one largely responsible for defeating the last of the hostile Indians. He was new to the sort of Indian fighting and would make many mistakes in the coming weeks, but he would learn from them. For now, Mackenzie was the instrument of retribution. He had been dispatched to kill Comanches in their Great Plains fastness because 6 years after the end of the Civil War, the western frontier was an open and bleeding wound, a smoking ruin littered with corpses and charred chimneys, a place where anarchy and torture killings have replaced the rule of law, where Indians and specifically Comanches raided at will. Victorious in war, unchallenged by foreign foes in North America for the first time in its history, the Union now found itself unable to deal with the handful of remaining Indian tribes that had not been destroyed, assimilated, or forced to retreat meekly into reservations where they quickly learned the meaning of abject subjugation and starvation. The hostiles were all residents of the Great Plains. All were mounted, well armed, and driven now by a mixture of vengeance and political desperation. They were Comanches, Kiowas, Arapahoes, Cheyennes, and Western Sioux. For Mackenzie, on the southern plains, the Comanches were the obvious target. No tribe in history of the Spanish, French, Mexican, Texan, and American occupations of this land had ever caused so much havoc and death. None was even a close second. So them Comanche didn't play around, man.
All right.
They was about that. About that life, man. So, you know, they didn't really know how to deal with the Comanches like that. So they had started, you know, the more, like they start calling like the ones that I guess civilized, assimilated with them, they start calling them the civilized tribes, because they wanted to play ball with them. But the Comanche, they was not having it. They was not having that at all. So, and all the Western Plains was. Give me another water bottle. And this is how bad things were in 1871 along this razor edge of civilization could be seen in a number of settlers who had abandoned their lands. The frontier carried westward with so much sweat and blood and toil, it was now rolling backward, retreating. Colonel Randall Marcy, who accompanied Sherman on a western tour in the spring and who had known the country intimately for decades, had been shocked to find that in many places there were fewer people than 18 years before. If the Indian marauders were not punished, he wrote, the whole country seems in a fair way of becoming totally depopulated. 3, this phenomenon was not entirely known. Was not entirely known to the history of the New World. The Comanches had also stopped the northward advance of the Spanish Empire in the 18th century, an empire that had, up to that point, easily subdued and killed millions of Indians in Mexico and moved at will through the continent. So that's why they didn't start speaking Spanish over here. They stopped in Mexico because they came in contact with the Comanches and the Apaches, right? So that's why Spanish stopped in Mexico. So they couldn't come up and fight them. Go ahead.
I was just wondering if you had been checked in for attendance.
Because also, Marshala had me that I took in, and I think I did, but I don't know.
Yeah, I got you wrote
I
down.
was checking in.
I got you wrote down.
Okay, good.
That was it. Now, after more of a century of relentless westward movement, they were rolling back civilizations advanced again, only on a much larger scale. Whole areas of the borderlands were simply emptying out, melting back eastward toward the safeties of the forest. One county, Wise, had seen its population drop from 3,160 in the year 1860 to 1,450 in 1870. In some places, the line of settlements had been driven back 100 miles. For if General Sherman wondered about the cause, as he once did, his tour with Marcy relieved him of his doubts. That spring, he had narrowly missed being killed themselves by a party of raiding Indians. The Indians, mostly Kiowas, passed them over because of a shaman's superstitions, and had instead attacked a nearby wagon train. What happened was typical of the savage, revenge-driven attacks by the Comanches and Kiowas in Texas in the post-war years. So he said it was a savage, revenge-driven. So this was getting back at what they did to them.
Mm-hmm.
So this wasn't unprovoked. So they try to paint the picture like these Indians, they just didn't have nothing else to do.
Right.
So what was not typical was Sherman's proximity and his own very personal and mortal sense that he might have been a victim to. Because of that raid, became famous, known to history as the Salt Creek Massacre. 7 men were killed in the raid, though that does not begin to describe the horror of what Mackenzie found at the scene. According to Captain Robert G. Carter, Mackenzie's subordinate, who witnessed this aftermath, the victims were stripped, scalped, and mutilated. Some had been beheaded, and others had their brains scooped out.
Mm.
Their fingers, toes, and private parts had been cut off and stuck in their mouths.
Mm.
You know where they got that from? Do I have to say it?
Sir.
Alright. I'm gonna say it anyway. Hell with them. The hell with these devils, man.
Yeah, right.
They took their fingers because that's what they like. You think they only did that to African, quote unquote African Americans?
Mm-hmm.
No, they did the same thing to them.
Right.
They were set like, you ever see like Indian heads in places?
Mm-hmm.
They were selling Indian heads. This was like a trophy. Just like the, what was it? Then like the Cleveland Indians, right?
Oh, God.
Or the Washington Redskins. There was an Indian head that was for sale. So this was all in retribution of what they did to them, back to them. But you see, only 7 men died. They did this to millions of them.
Right.
They killed millions of Native Americans.
Right.
And they remember this 7 men that died. Man, the hell with these 7 men, man. Go ahead.
So I can also add the Atlanta Braves and all that too, but the devil, the oppressor, the devil, man, he loved to cut off our private parts, man. He loved to do that. Every time it's an occurrence, he wants to chop off our private parts. Israel, man, he is a homosexual devil. So
Exactly. And like I said, this was in retribution. We read that. That was in retribution. This was revenge. Why would they do it? They did it because that's what they did to their people. They used to kill the Indian Native Americans and put their heads on display for everybody to see. But they don't want to tell you that story.
Right.
They don't want to explain that, just like the general brought out about a couple years ago. He said that it used to be like at the end of TV, it used to be like an Indian head or like at the end, like at 12, like at 12, 1 o'clock, TV shuts off, right? And you know, like in the 80s or whatever, like 80s and 90s. And all of a sudden there would be an Indian head. And they have like a target around it. That was synonymous of them killing Indians and taking their heads off. And they would show that on damn TV at the end of the broadcast.
Crazy.
Right? This is before 24-hour TV like everybody got now. You know, even when I was little, it would be like, you know, no TV from like 2 to 6. Even when I was little, like nothing was on during, like a lot of channels didn't come on during that time.
Right.
It would say no programming or something like that. So, but during this time, they would have that, and it would show this Indian head, and that was synonymous for them killing and selling their heads. So, what they did, they deserved. Let's be for real. They deserved this. They, like I said, this wasn't unprovoked.
Right.
They wasn't sitting at the house chilling. They just said, you know what? I feel like killing some devils today. It was not like that. They was attacking them back. They, like I said, they always try to take away from the response. You know, like you said, they detail their responses, but they don't detail what they did to them when they did the war. He said they killed thousands. He said one of them was responsible for killing thousands. They just grazed over that. But this war, when they killed these 7 men, oh my God. Right?
Yeah.
He said their bodies now laying in several inches of water and swollen or bloated beyond all chance of recognition, were filled full of arrows, which made them resemble porcupines. They had clearly been tortured too. Upon each exposed abdomen had been placed a mass of live coals. One wretched man, Samuel Elliott, who, fighting hard to the last, had evidently been wounded, was found chained between 2 wagons, and a fire having been made from the wagon pole, he had been slowly roasted to death, burnt to a crisp. They got it from them. How many times they used to roast us, man? They used to make, they don't, like I said, they don't tell you all these things. They used to make leather boots out of Native Americans' faces, man. Out of their skin. So, yeah. Thus the settlers' headlong flight eastward, especially on the Texas frontier, where such raiding was at its worst. After so many long and successful wars and conquests and dominion, it seemed implausible that the westward rush of Anglo-European civilization would stall in the prairies of central Texas. Oh, you know, you're not going to see a lot of, when they talk about what they did to them, because the only people that would more so tell the truth would be like the missionaries type people. They would tell more of the truth of what happened. You know what I'm saying?
It's like the missionaries, the ones that's trying to convert them to Christianity, right?
They would tell more of the slaughter. Like, they'll be more accurate. Like, the missionary devils are less devils when it comes to writing stuff in history. I put it like that. They don't lie as much. They typically tell more of the truth. But if you go to like the average devils, you know, when he teaches and he puts out there and puts in history, like I said, they didn't talk about it. They just said this person was responsible for killing such and such thousands of Native Americans.
Right.
But they didn't talk about none of this. They didn't talk about none of it because once they do it, they just bury it, sweep it under the rug, act like it never happened. But those 7 men, they go remember that because, of course, what did they do? They made publications for it, right? And then they still rile up other, you know, Caucasians. They roused them up. How was the KKK made, man? How did they rise them up? It was a movie called, what was that? Name of that movie? Was like The Great Civilization or something like that?
I don't know. Not good movies, I don't want.
No, you wouldn't have saw it. It was a picture movie.
Great Civilization.
No, I'm trying to think what's the name of it. It was that movie that they did, and all of a sudden they started getting a bunch of KKK members. He named that dude. Remember the dude that made the one off of Nat Turner? What was the name of that movie? I think he named it the same thing.
I'm not for sure.
The Birth of a Nation. That's what it's called.
Birth of a Nation, okay.
That's what that movie. It was like a picture film, a silent picture film. It was called Birth of a Nation. And they start showing that, you know, black people, we couldn't control ourselves. We were raping women, of course. All these things that we couldn't control ourselves. And then that's when they started rising up, the KKK members, and they started getting more numbers. And that's how they would do it, right? They would talk about what they did to them, but they wouldn't say, well, we did do this to them first. They wouldn't mention that. They would just tell them about what they did to, you know, what they did to them. All right. No tribe had ever managed to resist for very long the surge of nascent American civilization with its harquebuses and blunderbusses and muskets and eventually lethal repeating weapons and its endless stocks of eager, land-greedy settlers. Its elegant moral double standards and its complete disregard for native interests. Like you said, elegant moral double. It made it look good, but they had double standards. So the standards only applied to the Native Americans, but it didn't apply to them. Beginning with the subjection of the Atlantic coastal tribes, the Pequots, the Penobscots, and the Pamunkeys, the Wampanoags. Hundreds of tribes and bands had either perished from the earth, been driven west into territories, or forcibly assimilated. This included the Iroquois and the enormous warlike confederation that ruled the area of present-day New York. The more powerful Delawares, driven west into the lands of their enemies, the Iroquois. Yet further west into even more murderous foes on the plains. The Shawnees of Ohio country had fought a desperate rearward action starting in the 1750s. The great nations of the South, Chickasaw, Cherokee, Seminole, Creek, and Choctaw, saw their reservation lands expropriated in spite of a string of treaties. So they saw their land was still, they would have a whole bunch of treaties, which was another double standard. You know, they were supposed to stay in their land, but the oppressor didn't have to stay in his land. They could still come back and take from theirs. They were coerced westward into lands given them in yet more treaties that were violated before they were even signed. Hounded along a trail of tears until they too landed in Indian Territory, present-day Oklahoma, a land controlled by Comanches, Kiowas, Arapos, and Cheyennes. So they moved them over there so that they'll have less resources and they'll fight for each other's land. Because now they just forcibly removed them from their land. So don't think that, you know, they basically did like the Blood and the Crip War. They come in, they make each other fight, they make each other not like each other. So like, I'm not saying that we didn't ever have fights or battles, but what I'm saying is that, you know, they were resolved. But these oppressors came in and they started making us hate each other more. Like just start, you know, being disloyal to each other. And so when that happened, they would start up a battle, they would tell you they first. So you gotta be real, you gotta pay attention to what they're saying. They killed all of the buffalo, right? They killed 31 million buffalo. And then they moved like hundreds of thousands of Native Americans over into that same territory. So now they're gonna be fighting over resources there. See what I'm saying? Just like they did with black people. We all moved to certain places or whatever, right? And then now they took away all of the jobs, you know, and sent them overseas. And then now black people was fighting for common, you know, they were just fighting to survive. That's why they joined the Bloods and the Crips, because they were just trying to survive, man. That's why you gotta watch them. They real crafty on how they take over a nation of people.
Right.
Even stranger was that the Comanche. Oh, go ahead.
I want to share the story. Well, before I found the truth, I had I don't want to say a friend, but he's a dude, like, you know, back in the world, he was an African, a Somalian dude. But he told me when they came to America, he said, the oppressor tell them, don't watch the, you know, I forgot how he said it, but don't trust the American black man, because he'll rob you and kill you. Like, they try to paint a picture of us to be some savages and shit, man. That's like, you know, I know they ain't our brothers or nothing like that, but that's that picture they try to put on us, man. And how you talking about how they destroy motherfuckers and shit.
Yeah, that's what they do. They they paint a picture. They'll paint a picture of the Comanches to the Arapahoes or the I could never say the Iroquois. Paint them all looking bad, and then they make them all fight each other and they destroy each other. Just like if you want to get like a little bit of history on how they destroyed black men from black women, the color purple. Destroyed us, man. Like that movie came out, it destroyed on like now all black men beat their wives now.
Right.
So it made our image just go to the ground. And that movie is now in somewhat responsible for a lot of the the disarray between black men and black women. And we don't even realize it. Next time you go see that movie, you're gonna see that, you know, you'll see how the hell it brought upon, you know, black people. Like I think I was talking about it, because everybody was trying to, what was they trying to say? They was trying to like, because you know when that one brother died, Kevin Samuels, right?
Mm-hmm.
When he died, everybody was trying to say, well, he disrespected black women, right?
Mm-hmm.
He disrespected black women. No, I mean, as far as I didn't say, I never say him disrespect black women. I say him tell the truth about them. But whenever you tell the truth about a black woman, what does that mean? That means you disrespecting her.
Okay.
I say one time, there was a brother on there, he was like short, big brother, and he had no money, right? He called him a fat F, right? Called him a fat F.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And then,
he said, Salaki, if I may say, he said he was like 5'5", 280 something pounds,
yeah,
something like that. Yeah, I remember that.
He called him a fat F. And he said, you gotta pick a straight. You can't be effed up in all of them. He went in on him.
Yeah,
but you know, stuff like that don't go viral.
Right.
Even the one sister said it too. The Muslim sister, Shahrazad Ali, she even said the black women, they don't get examined like that. They've been protected. Every time you say something about a black woman, they shift it back to the men all of a sudden. And a lot of that came from that movie. And look who was in the movie. That bastard Oprah Winfrey.
Damn right.
Who all she did in the 80s was destroy the image of black men. That's all she did in the 80s. So I'm trying to get something on there real quick. I know we tipping off, going off, but I just want to. What was the name of that movie? The Purple what? The Color Purple?
Slap.
By Alice Walker. And this chick here, she was a feminist. She of course was part of the hijacking of the civil rights movement. Because you know, at first it was the civil rights movement, and then it left and went to the women's movement. So she was a part of that, then she went to feminism. So she wanted advocacy of women of color. She started talking about women and stuff. She fought for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So she started fighting for, she even fought for the fake Jews, man. Fought for them. But then she went right along here and destroyed the image of black men with this movie. I'm trying to see. I was trying to see if I can remember right. Melvin R. Limenthal. One second. Yep. Look at this right here. This is the woman right here. This is her and her husband. She married to an oppressor. That's just what I thought. I just wanted to confirm. That woman that made The Color Purple was married to an oppressor.
Oh man, lock it. Damn.
She was married to one. I just had to confirm it because you know,
Damn.
we always speak the truth. We always the truth, right?
Oh God.
Married to an oppressor. And that's who made The Color Purple. So when black women, when you watch The Color Purple, just think that's who you watching a woman that really loves her oppressor.
Damn.
She don't love black men. All right. Let's get back into this.
Watch it, sir.
Go ahead.
Yeah, her name was Alice Walker. That's
Yep.
who it was, by the way.
Yeah. We said that a second ago. I believe Alice Walker. She married him. So and that's who she's Yep. It's sad too. And even she was part of being black and she was Native American. Right? All of that. And she sold her soul for our oppressor, man. They were the first legally married interracial couple in Mississippi.
Oh no, lock it.
Yep, since those laws introduced, well, you know, the missing, you know, saying that they can marry, it was introduced to the state. They were harassed and threatened by whites, including the Ku Klux Klan, and they had a daughter, Rebecca. Right. So this is who made The Color Purple. Somebody that don't even like black men.
Yeah, right.
So just so you know. And I believe she became a homosexual after that, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, she looked like a stud anyway, it's a lie.
It's a lot. Once you mess with the oppressor, you might as well be it.
Yeah, you might as well.
Might as well. I mean.
Might as well. I think this is who she's Gloria Steinem. Oh my God. You don't know, man. I might have to get into that a little bit on another topic, another day. She got a picture of Gloria Steinem, which is another woman that believed in destroying black people. Gloria Steinem.
Yeah, that'd be heavy right there.
A fake Jew woman. Wanted to destroy. She was part of the eugenics movement. What eugenics was, you know, eugenics is like they were trying to eradicate bad genes, which basically black genes. And she was sitting alongside her and the other fake Jew woman, who started doing Planned Parenthood, her whole focus was to destroy the black community.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them, they did it side by side, and Alice Walker was with them. So that's what I want you to think about when you think of The Color Purple. It basically was a racist movie made by a black woman against her own people. It was a sellout movie. All right, let me get back into it so you try to finish. Even stranger was that the Comanche stunning success was happening amid phenomenal technological and social changes in the West. In 1869, the Transcontinental Railroad was completed, linking the industrializing East with the developing West and rendering the old trails, Oregon, Santa Fe, and tributaries instantly obsolete. With the rails came cattle herded northward in epic drives to railheads by Texans who can make fast fortunes getting them to Chicago markets. With the rails too came buffalo hunters carrying deadly accurate 50 caliber sharp rifles that could kill effectively extreme range. The grim, violent, opportunistic men blessed now by both a market in the east for buffalo and a means of getting it there. In 1871, a buffalo still roamed the plains. Earlier that year, a herd of 4 million had been spotted near the Arkansas River in present-day southern Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
The main body was 50 miles deep and 25 miles wide. But the slaughter had already begun. It would soon become the greatest mass destruction of warm-blooded animals in the human history. What the Bible say? It says if you ask the animals, they'll tell you who the devil is. Boy.
Right.
In Kansas alone, the bones of 31 million buffalo were sold for fertilizer between 1868 and 1881. All of those profound changes were underway as Mackenzie's raiders departed their camps on the Clear Fork. The nation was booming. A railroad had finally stitched together. There was only this one obstacle left: the warlike and reconstructed Indian tribes who inhabited the physical wastes of the Great Plains. Of those, the most remote, primitive, and irredeemably hostile were a band of Comanches known as the Quahadis. Like all Plains Indians, they were nomadic. They hunted primarily the southernmost part of the High Plains, a place known to the Spanish, who had been objectively driven from it. As Comancheria, the Llano Estacado, located within Comancheria, was a dead flat tableland larger than New England and rising in its highest elevations to more than 5,000 feet. For Europeans, the land was like a bad hallucination. Although I traveled over them for more than 300 leagues, wrote Coronado in a letter to the King of Spain on October 20th, 1541, there were no landmarks that if we had been swallowed up by the sea, there was not a stone, nor a bit of rising ground, nor a tree, nor a shrub, nor anything to go by. The Canadian River formed its northern boundary. In the east was the precipitous Caprock Escarpment, a cliff rising somewhere between 200 and 2,000 feet that the Mercedes. Let me try to skip ahead real quick. All right. All right. All right. So, all right. They had plagues there. The plagues started destroying a lot of the Comanches. The Quahadis were the hardest, fiercest, least yielding component of a tribe that had long had the reputation as the most violent and warlike on the continent. If they ran low on water, they were known to drink the contents of a dead horse's stomach, something even the toughest Texas Ranger would not do. Even other Comanches feared them. They were the richest of all plains bands and the currency by which Indians measure wealth, by horses. and in the years after the Civil War managed a herd of some 15,000. He also owned Texas cattle without number. On that clear autumn day in 1871, Mackenzie's troops were hunting coyotes. Because they were nomadic, it was not possible to fix their location. One could know only their general ranges, their hunting grounds, and perhaps old camp locations. They were known to hunt the Llano Estacado. They liked to camp in the depths of the Palo Duro Canyon, the second largest canyon in North America after the Grand Canyon. They often stayed near the headwaters of the Peace River and the McClellan's Creek and in Blanco Canyon, all within a roughly 100-mile ambit of present-day Amarillo in the upper Texas Panhandle. If you were pursuing them, as Mackenzie was, you had your Tonkawa scouts fan out far in advance of the column. The Tonks, as they were called, members of an occasionally cannibalistic Indian tribe that had been nearly exterminated by the Comanches, and whose remaining members lusted for vengeance, would look for signs, try to cut trails, and follow the trails to the lodges. Without them, the army would never have had the shadow of a chance against these or any Indians on open plains. So they use because, well, like I said, a lot of these they don't tell you. The Tonkawa had, like, they more of assimilated in. So then when they fought and they killed the settlement, some of the Tonkawa were looked upon as traitors. So they were killed too. So when that happened, now instead of them hunting the devil, they align with the devil.
Oh God, damn.
It's heavy. By the afternoon of the second day, the Tonks had found a trail. They reported to Mackenzie that they were tracking a Coyote band under the leadership of a brilliant young war chief named Quana, a Comanche word that meant odor or fragrance. He probably stank. Oh no, it was actually a Comanche warrior. So he probably did stink. He probably smelled good. I thought it was what's the name? A devil. But his name was Quana, which that's a Hebrew word. The idea was to find and destroy Quana's village. Mackenzie had a certain advantage in that no white man had ever dared to try such a thing before. Not in the Panhandle Plains, not against the Coyotes. Mackenzie and his men did not know much about Quana. No one did. Though there was an intimacy of information on the frontier, the opposing sides often had a surprisingly detailed understanding of one another, in spite of the enormous physical distances between them and the fact that they were trying to kill one another. Quana was simply too young for anyone to know much about him yet, where he had been or what he had done, though no one would be able to estimate the date of his birth until many years later. It was most likely in 1848, making him 23 that year and 8 years younger than Mackenzie, who was also young. Who was also so young that few people in Texas, Indian or white, knew much about him at the time. Both men achieved their fame only in the final brutal Indian wars of the mid-1870s. Quana was exceptionally young to be a chief. He was reputed to be a ruthless, clever, and fearless in battle. But there was something else about Quana, too. He was a half-breed, the son of a Comanche chief and a white woman. People on the Texas frontier would soon learn of this about him, probably because the fact was so exceptional. Comanche warriors had for centuries taken female captors, Indian, French, English, Spanish, Mexican, and American, and fathered children by them who were raised as Comanches, but there is no record of any prominent half-white commander war chief. By the time Mackenzie was hunting him in 1871, Quana's mother had long been famous. She was best known of all Indian captives of this era, discussed in drawing rooms in New York and London as the White Squaw because she refused on repeated occasions to return to our people, thus challenging one of the most fundamental of the Eurocentric assumptions about Indian ways. So they thought they were so savages that it was weird that this woman didn't want to return to the Europeans, because if they were raping women, why would she want to return?
Right.
Think about this. You got to read between the BS.
Right.
They didn't rape them, so she was probably treated pretty nicely, right?
Right.
So then she like, no, I'm staying here, shoot, because you know oppressors, they the ones that be beating their women, like they, especially in the 1800s.
Right.
Boy, they used to whoop their women's behind in the 1800s. That's why the feminist movement took off so much, because they was trying not to get their behind whooped. We wasn't beating our women like that, because you had brothers that would beat his behind, right?
Right.
This was not happening. It's like a myth that black men be. I'm not saying that ain't no black men never did it. What I'm saying is that it's like every woman, she just feels like if you yell at her, it's like you hitting her. And it's like the first thing she would say is, he hit me, and all of a sudden everybody goes crazy.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Christian culture of Europe and the savage, bloody, and morally backward ways of the Indians. No sane person would ever chose the latter. The few other than Quanah's mother did. Her name was Cynthia Ann Parker. She was the daughter of one of early Texas' most prominent families, one that included Texas Ranger captains, politicians, and prominent Baptists who founded the state's first prominent church, Protestant church. At the age of 9, she had been kidnapped in a Comanche raid at Parker's Fort, 90 miles south of present Dallas. She soon forgot her mother tongue, learned Indian ways, became a full member of the tribe. She married Peta Nocona, a prominent war chief, and had 3 children by him, who Quanah was the eldest. When Quanah was 12, and Cynthia Ann was recaptured during an attack by Texas Rangers on her village, during which everyone but her and her infant daughter, Prairie Flower, were killed. Mackenzie and his soldiers most likely knew the story of Cynthia Ann Parker. Mostly everyone on the frontier did, but they had no idea that her blood ran in Quanah's veins. They would not learn this until 1875, for now they knew that he was the target of the largest Indian expedition mounted since 1865, one of the largest ever undertaken. See if I can skip ahead. It's a long story. Trying to see if we can skip ahead. Man. Well, Quanah was no joke, boy. Nah. Okay. This midnight raid was Quanah's calling card, a clear message that hunting him and his Comanche warriors in their homeland was going to be a difficult and treacherous business. Thus began that would become known as the Battle of Blanco Canyon, which was in turn opening salvo in a bloody Indian war in the highlands of West Texas that would last 4 years and culminate in the final destruction of the Comanche nation. Blanco Canyon would also provide for U.S. Army with its first look at Quanah. Captain Carter, who would win the Congressional Medal of Honor for his bravery in Blanco Canyon, offered this description of the young war chief in battle on a day after the Midnight Stampede. A large and powerful built chief led the brunch on a cold black racing pony, leaning forward upon his mane, his heels nervously working the animal's side. With the six-shooter poised in the air, he seemed the incarnation of savage, brutal joy. His face was smeared with black war paint, which gave his features a satanic look. A full-length headdress or war bonnet of eagle's feathers spread it out as he rode, and descending from his forehead over head and back to his ponytail almost swept the ground. Large brass hoops were in his ears. He was naked to the waist, wearing simply leggings, moccasins, and a breechclout. A necklace of bear's claws hung about his neck. Bells jingled as he rode at headlong speed, followed by the leading warriors, all eager to outstrip him in the race. But it was Quanah, principal war chief of the Quahadas. Moments later, Quanah wheeled his horse in the direction of an unfortunate private named Seander Gregg, and as Carter and his men watched, blew Gregg's brains out. Heavy right there. Quanah ain't play, boy. Quanah ain't play. So, anybody got anything to bring out? Any questions at all? All right, with that, pass the class over to Prison Officer MashaAllah.
I.S.U.P.K security announcements. Well, the I.S.U.P.K started out at 1 West, 125th Street, Harlem, New York. Rule for new brother and sister. When a new brother or sister comes into the school, they are off limits for 6 months. They are to be saluted only. They are here to share themselves with the world. If they need transportation, the teacher will arrange it. After 6 months, if a brother or sister has an interest in a particular person, he or she must get permission from the head to speak to a brother or sister. There is another 6 months in which the brother or sister will court each other. After this 6-month period, the brother or sister will get permission from the head to marry. Tithes, which is a commandment, Numbers 18:21, Malachi 3:8 through 10. Ma'ashra means tenth in the Hebrew. 10% of every penny of any increase the Lord gives you. Give to the Treasury Department or teacher. Priest fund, free will offering for priests, not mandatory. Whatsoever amount you would like. Upcoming holy convocations, we are still in the Feast of First Fruits. Remind Akim and Akwath to check the bulletin board in the hallway. If anyone wants to be a trooper in the school, start wearing our black boots, shirts, pants, headband, and scarves, and to Google dress every time they are heading to the school. All right, and with that, we'll give the teacher a courtesy salute. Men of Israel, Elijah, Shabbat, Elijah, Barak, Yahweh Hashem, Yahweh Shabbat,
Yahweh Hashem, Yahweh Shabbat.
Yamatai means hands down. We do have a sister in the school, Sar, which means turn. We get a sister a courtesy salute. Men of Israel, Elijah Shabbat, Elijah, Barak, Yahweh Shemar Alatham by Hashem Yahweh Shah. Yamatai means hands down. Class dismissed.